It's the Side Quest Podcast.
So I want you to just imagine watching a local evening news broadcast.
Right?
The year is 1989. You're sitting in your living room in Las Vegas.
Just a totally normal Tuesday evening.
Exactly. And on the screen, there's this man in total silhouette. Like, his face is completely obscured by shadow. His voice is electronically altered to this deep mechanical hum. And he's going by the pseudonym Dennis.
It's very dramatic.
Super dramatic. And on live television, this man looks into the camera and claims that the United States government is actively hiding and trying to reverse engineer alien spacecraft in the Nevada desert.
I mean, if you were watching that broadcast back in 1989, it sounded like pure science fiction. Just the ultimate fringe conspiracy.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the kind of sensationalism you'd expect to see in, like, a grocery store checkout tabloid, you know.
Yep.
Certainly not on the 5 p.m. newscast.
Right. And for decades, that was basically the general consensus. The claims made by this man, who we now know as Robert Scott Lazar, were just mocked relentlessly.
Yeah, he was written off as a complete fraud.
A fraud, an elaborate storyteller, a guy who just wanted his bizarre 15 minutes of fame. But, and this is really why we're here today, something monumental just occurred.
The 2026 drop.
Yeah, the recent release of the May 2026 PRSU files. That's the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters. And it has violently shaken that whole skeptical consensus.
Because suddenly, this guy's wildly specific testimony from the 1980s is looking, well, uncomfortably prophetic.
Exactly. And the sheer volume of data we are looking at now, newly declassified by the Department of War in 2026, it forces us to look backward.
We basically have to reevaluate all our baseline assumptions about historical military whistleblowers.
That is exactly our mission for this deep dive into the source material. We are taking a massive stack of sources, declassified intelligence briefings, independent investigative audits, the new PEESU files, all of it.
Right.
And we want to look at the paradox that is Bob Lazar. But
Yeah.
let's be incredibly clear right out of the gate here. We are not here to act as a jury. You know, we aren't here to definitively prove or disprove him.
Right. No, we are just acting as your guides to the material. We're going to unpack the verified facts, place them right next to the glaring, undeniable inconsistencies in his background, and just evaluate it all.
Because the inconsistencies are definitely there.
Oh, they are massive.
Yeah.
But we also have to look at how recently declassified military telemetry overlays with his physical claims. We're going to explore why, after nearly 40 years, this story simply refuses to die.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really understand the sheer magnitude of the technological claims, I feel like you first have to understand the psychological profile of the man making them.
The narrative connection here is crucial. Yeah.
Right. How does an allegedly ordinary technician end up inside the most highly compartmentalized, secretive facility on planet Earth?
Well, we have to start with his origins. So, Bob Lazar was born in 1959 in Coral Gables, Florida, but he was raised primarily in Westbury, Long Island.
Just a standard suburban kid.
By all traditional accounts, yeah. A very quiet, standard upbringing. But what really jumps out of his early profile is this intense, almost consuming fascination with practical science.
Like hands-on stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He wasn't just interested in, textbook theories. He had a deep appetite for understanding how things worked at their most fundamental mechanical level.
Right.
He was building chemistry labs in his bedroom, experimenting with solid-state electronics, and he was just obsessed with propulsion.
And this is where we really need to point out a major psychological distinction for you, the listener, because if you follow this topic at all, you know the typical UFO enthusiast profile.
The convention crowd.
Yeah, the people who actively seek out the spotlight, who headline the events, write the sprawling books, and really lean into the whole ideology. Lazar presents as something else entirely.
He does. He presents as a deeply reluctant whistleblower.
He never wanted the attention.
He has repeatedly stated over the decades that he never wanted to come forward. I mean, he didn't even believe in flying saucers or extraterrestrials before he claims to have actually walked up and touched one.
Which is wild to think about.
Yeah, and for the vast majority of his public life, he has actively tried to exit the conversation. He refuses interviews, avoids the limelight, all of it.
Which brings us to the early 1980s. He relocates to New Mexico, and we have hard, undeniable, printed proof that he is working in highly technical, elite environments.
The Los Alamos Monitor article.
Yes. There is a very famous 1982 article in the Los Alamos Monitor. And keep in mind, this isn't some obscure community newsletter, right?
No, this is the local newspaper serving one of the most prestigious, highly classified nuclear scientific laboratories in the world.
Exactly. And the article features a young Bob Lazar and a Honda car that he had heavily modified by literally strapping a jet engine to
It
it,
wasn't just a prop either. It was a functional jet-powered Honda.
which is terrifying and awesome.
It speaks volumes about his practical, hands-on engineering mindset. He was taking surplus aerospace hardware and mating it to civilian automotive drivetrains.
Just tinkering in his driveway.
Right. But the critical detail in that 1982 article isn't the car itself. It's the caption.
Oh, this is the best part.
The newspaper identifies him as a physicist working at the Los Alamos Mission Physics Facility.
A facility that deals with particle accelerators and high-energy physics. And that article was never retracted.
Never.
It was never corrected by the lab's public relations office. He was definitely there.
Okay.
But, I mean, how does a guy building jet cars in his driveway jump from Los Alamos to reverse engineering non-human craft?
According to Lazar, it all comes down to a chance encounter with one of those formidable, intimidating figures in modern physics, Dr. Edward Teller.
Edward Teller, like the father of the hydrogen bomb.
The very same. Teller was a towering figure in the national security apparatus. He was deeply involved in the Strategic Defense Initiative, the Star Wars program during the Reagan administration.
So how do they meet?
Lazar claims he met Teller prior to a lecture at Los Alamos. Lazar was just leaning against a wall, reading the local paper, which happened to feature his jet car on the front page.
Of course.
Teller noticed it. They struck up a conversation about propulsion and high-energy physics, and Lazar managed to impress him.
Wow.
Impress him enough that Teller, acting as this unofficial gatekeeper to the black world, encouraged Lazar to submit a resume to a specific contact.
So late 1988 rolls around and Lazar gets a call. But the call isn't from the Department of Defense directly. It's from EG&G.
Right, EG&G.
And if you know the aerospace world, EG&G is a massive heavyweight defense contractor. They handle incredibly sensitive technical work for the Department of Energy.
They focus on nuclear timing devices, and they have deep, deep administrative ties to the classified operations at the Nevada test site.
Including Groom Lake.
Including Groom Lake, yeah.
And the recruitment process he describes is just a textbook example of how deep black programs operate.
The job was described to him in deliberately vague terms. They emphasized that a high-level Q security clearance was required.
The work was highly compartmentalized.
Extremely. The pay was exceptional. And most importantly, the specific location of the job would not be disclosed to him until he was physically en route.
The level of secrecy he describes is just suffocating. He goes to Las Vegas for his initial security briefings. He signs extensive non-disclosure agreements and paperwork that he says explicitly waived his constitutional rights.
He's told the program he is entering officially does not exist.
Right. Zero paper trail. And if he talks to anyone, his wife, his family, anyone, the consequences would be severe, like legally and physically. He even claimed they held the gun to his head during a briefing just to emphasize the point.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of intelligence recruitment, this fits exactly what counterintelligence analysts call the compartmented whistleblower model.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, skeptics and mainstream academics often scoff at Lazar because he doesn't fit the mold of a senior, highly credentialed academic theoretical physicist.
Right. People always say, why wouldn't they hire a Nobel laureate to look at a UFO?
Exactly. But historically, deep black security apparatuses actually prefer to recruit unconventional, highly practical technicians for reverse engineering.
Wait, really? Why wouldn't you want the absolute smartest theoretical minds on the planet looking at alien tech?
Because high-profile academics are a massive security liability.
Oh.
Think about it. A Nobel laureate going missing in the desert for 6 months raises immediate questions in the international scientific community.
Right, they have speaking engagements and classes.
They have massive paper trails, published papers, and wide networks. A contract technician, however, is basically invisible.
That makes total sense.
The shadow apparatus wants people with brilliant, intuitive, hands-on mechanical skills, the kind of guy who builds a jet car from scrap, but who lack the international profiles.
They want a wrench turner, not a theorist.
They want someone who can look at a piece of unknown hardware and figure out how to turn it on, not necessarily write a peer-reviewed paper about the quantum mechanics behind it.
Invisible. That perfectly transitions into the actual commute he took to work, which is just a masterclass in operational security.
JNF flights.
Yeah. It's late 1988. Lazar goes to McCarran Airport in Las Vegas, a completely normal civilian airport, but Lazar boards a plane operated under the call sign Janet.
A fleet of unmarked Boeing 737s with a single red stripe down the side.
And the government now openly acknowledges these flights shuttle cleared workers out to the Nevada test site.
But once they are airborne, the operational security intensifies. The windows on the Janet flights are often covered, or the passengers are instructed to keep the shades down.
They can't even look out the window.
No, they aren't allowed to know the specific flight path. They fly out to a heavily guarded landing strip at the Nellis Range Complex, specifically the Groom Lake installation.
But Groom Lake, which everyone knows as Area 51, isn't his final destination. That's just like the transfer station. He gets off the plane and gets onto a bus with completely blacked out windows. He can't see the terrain at all. Lazar estimates the drive takes about 15 to 30 minutes, traveling roughly 15 miles south of Groom Lake down a dirt road.
And when the bus finally stops and he steps out, he is at a dry lake bed he identifies as Papoose Lake. He called the specific facility S4.
S4. And his physical description of S4 is a marvel of architectural camouflage. He didn't describe a generic military base with fences and guard towers.
No, he described hangars that were built directly into the base of the mountainside.
And the hangar doors weren't flat steel, right?
No, they were corrugated and heavily textured, then painted to perfectly mimic the complex angles of the surrounding desert rock and sand.
It's an optical illusion.
It's not just paint, yeah. It's designed to defeat overhead satellite reconnaissance. From any distance or from orbit, the hangars were completely invisible. They blended seamlessly into the mountain slope.
He said you only realized there was a massive facility there when you were standing right up against the seams of the doors.
Correct. So he arrives at S4, clears the biometric security checks, and the doors open.
Let's transition into what he claims he actually saw and touched once inside. Because having established his arrival, we really have to detail the hardware.
This is the hardware that has sparked 35 years of relentless, agonizing debate in the aerospace and physics communities.
Inside those disguised hangars, the environment was highly controlled. He described it as antiseptic, maintained in a perpetual twilight, almost dimly lit compared to a standard engineering bay.
It was industrial and jarringly normal in how the government personnel moved around, just carrying clipboards and tools. But what they were studying were 9 distinct spacecraft of non-human origin.
9 of them, just sitting there in various states of disassembly and analysis.
Some look like they've been hit by projectiles, others look totally pristine.
And Lazar says he was assigned to the propulsion reverse engineering team for one specific craft that he affectionately nicknamed the Sport Model.
And he provided deeply specific physical specifications for the Sport Model. He described it as exactly 15 feet tall and 52 feet in diameter.
And the exterior was weird, right?
Very. The exterior metallurgy was unlike anything in commercial aerospace. It was entirely seamless. There were no welds, no rivets, no access panels, no distinct joint boundaries at all.
Like it was all one piece.
He said it looked like unpolished stainless steel or liquid titanium, but it had this visual quality of appearing organically grown rather than manufactured piece by piece in a factory.
Organically grown. I mean, that is such a wild, specific detail to include if you're just making up a story in 1989.
You'd expect a hoaxer to describe blinking lights, exhaust ports, and antennas.
Exactly. But he described something that looks like it was poured into a mold or grown in a vat. And the inside is even eerier. He says he gained access through a hatch that seemed to just appear in the seamless metal.
And the interior was incredibly cramped.
Yeah, the maximum ceiling clearance in the central bay was about 4.5 feet.
Which strongly indicates that the intended occupants, the original pilots of this vehicle, were not human.
Definitely not human.
The ergonomics were entirely wrong for a human crew. The layout featured minimalist, low-slung seating that was integrated directly into the floor and 3 reactor-adjacent control points.
But no conventional avionics.
None. No control sticks, no dashboards, no wire bundles, no analog dials, no screens.
So, if there's no steering wheel, no throttle, and no wiring, how does it move? How do you fly it?
That is exactly where Lazar's primary assignment comes in. He had to figure out the propulsion system. And his description of this system completely shattered everything he and the broader scientific community thought they knew about physics.
Let's get into the reactor.
At the geometric center of the craft's power matrix was a reactor, roughly the shape of a half-sphere and the size of a basketball.
A basketball?
Yeah. It sat on the floor, requiring no external power inputs, no cooling towers, and no massive wiring harnesses. The fuel source was something entirely unknown to human science at the time, element 115.
Element 115. He described it as coming in these small, remarkably heavy, orange-hued metallic disks.
Right.
So how does a basketball-sized reactor use a heavy orange disk to move a 52-foot, incredibly dense metal ship?
Well, according to Lazar, the reactor's mechanism was a form of controlled subatomic particle manipulation. The reactor bombarded the element 115 target with a highly focused proton beam.
Okay.
When the element 115 nucleus absorbed a proton, it briefly transmuted into element 116, which immediately decayed, releasing an antimatter particle.
And antimatter is like the holy grail of energy production, because when an antimatter particle and a normal matter particle collide, they annihilate each other.
It is a 100% efficient conversion of mass into raw energy, governed by Einstein's E equals mc squared.
Precisely. And the antimatter produced was channeled through a specialized turned waveguide tube and annihilated against a heavier gas target.
Which produced immense, staggering amounts of usable thermal and electrical energy. But more importantly, the specific geometry of this nuclear reaction produced a distinct, controllable gravity wave.
Gravity waves. Okay, so the energy generates these gravity waves, and then the craft amplifies them using 3 separate gravity wave generators located at the base of the ship.
Right.
They focus these waves downward, effectively bending the gravitational field of the Earth, or the local space-time metric, around the ship itself.
Which means the craft does not fly in any conventional aerodynamic sense.
There's no exhaust.
There is no kinetic thrust pushing out the back. There is no aerodynamic lift generated by wings cutting through the air. It doesn't push against the atmosphere like a jet or a rocket. Instead, it manipulates the gravitational metric directly.
It physically warps space-time in its immediate vicinity.
Yes.
So what does this all mean? How do we visualize this? I always try to imagine placing a heavy bowling ball on a soft mattress.
Okay, yeah.
The heavy ball creates a deep dent, right? A steep distortion in the fabric of the mattress. The craft isn't using a jet engine to push through the air. It's projecting a massive dent in the fabric of space-time right in front of itself, and it is just constantly, perpetually falling downhill into that dent.
And because it controls the dent, the environment itself is forced to move around the craft.
That just blows my mind.
That is an excellent, functionally accurate analogy. To explain the physics a bit deeper, we really need to look at the Einstein field equations.
Let's do it.
Specifically, physicists use something called a tensor to represent the space-time metric, often denoted mathematically as G-mu-nu. In standard general relativity, to warp space to the degree Lazar is describing, to create that dent in the mattress, you need an immense mass energy density.
Oh, immense.
We are talking about the mass of a planet or a star localized in a small area.
Hold on, let's translate that. You're saying that human physics dictates you need the weight of the Earth to bend space enough to move a ship like that?
Yes.
And Lazar is saying they did it with a device the size of a basketball.
Exactly. That is the core of the controversy right there.
All right.
Lazar's claim was that the onboard reactor completely bypassed this mass restriction by utilizing the unique, unknown structural properties of element 115. He asserted that the strong nuclear force holding the element 115 atom together extends slightly past the perimeter of the atom itself. The reactor accesses this extended force and amplifies it.
Oh, wow.
He was asserting that gravity isn't just a consequence of massive objects, it's a wave that can be synthesized, isolated, and directed like an electromagnetic beam.
Which violates everything we know.
This total violation of the standard model is exactly what made mainstream physicists dismiss him entirely when he went public.
And he described 2 specific flight modes based on this gravitational manipulation. The first is Omicron mode. What exactly is happening kinematically when the ship does that?
Omicron mode is a low-power configuration. The craft hovers, using just one of the 3 gravity generators to counteract the local terrestrial gravity of Earth.
And the other 2?
The other 2 generators are held in standby. It's used for lower speed, precise atmospheric maneuvers, essentially balancing the ship on a single pillar of inverted gravity.
And the second mode, the one for actual spaceflight?
Delta mode. This is the high-power configuration for deep space travel. In delta mode, the craft must physically tilt its base directly toward its destination coordinate vector.
Like turning on its side.
Yeah, all 3 gravity generators align, phase together, and focus on that single distant point. They severely warp the local space-time manifold to pull the destination toward the ship, allowing for near-instantaneous transit across vast cosmic distances without exceeding the speed of light locally.
It just sounds I mean, it sounds impossible. To an everyday person, it sounds like an episode of Star Trek, but to a nuclear physicist in 1989, it must have sounded like absolute offensive heresy.
It was treated as heresy.
Hmm.
And that brings us out of the hangar and back into the harsh light of reality. We've just explained this mind-bending physics concept, but we really need to ground this discussion.
Yeah, we have to look at the pushback.
Because the immediate backlash to Lazar in 1989 was brutal, and the skeptical case against him is incredibly robust. We must examine why so many credible scientists, investigative journalists, and intelligence officials absolutely insist that Bob Lazar is a fraud.
The skeptical case cannot be ignored. And the single largest vulnerability in Lazar's entire narrative, like the gaping hole that critics drive a truck through, is his academic history.
His degrees.
He has claimed for decades that he holds a master's degree in physics from MIT and a master's degree in electronic technology from Caltech.
Two of the most prestigious, academically rigorous institutions on the planet. Programs that require intense, highly visible participation. You have to publish thesis papers, defend them before panels, work in cohorts.
And extensive, exhaustive audits by independent researchers, journalists, and skeptics have yielded absolutely zero records of his attendance at either university. No transcripts, no diplomas, no classmates who remember sitting next to him in a lecture hall, no professors who mentored his thesis, no yearbook photos, a complete and total black hole.
It becomes even more problematic when researchers pulled his high school records. He graduated in the bottom third of his class from Westbury High School. His transcripts show he took exactly one science course, chemistry, and received mediocre grades.
Right.
The idea that someone with that specific academic profile gains direct, unassisted admission to elite, highly competitive postgraduate programs at MIT and Caltech is, frankly, highly improbable without a massive intervening academic record, which also doesn't exist.
Let me challenge that perspective for a second, though. If you're listening to this right now, your internal BS detector is probably screaming. You're thinking, a guy with a C- in high school chemistry built an antimatter reactor.
Exactly.
But think about it from the other side. If Bob Lazar is this brilliant, highly calculated rogue fabricator, if he is smart enough to invent a cohesive theory of antimatter gravity propulsion that doesn't contradict itself for 35 years, why would he fabricate degrees that are so easily disprovable?
That's a fair question.
He had to know investigative journalists would call MIT. It doesn't track logically for a master con man. Is it possible he just lied on his resume back in the 80s to get his foot in the door at EG&G, got caught up in his own lie, and now he's stuck maintaining it because admitting he lied about college ruins his credibility about the aliens?
I see the logic in that defense. I do, but I strongly disagree. It's not just that he lied on a resume. It's the persistence of the specific lie. Criminals and hoaxers often make sloppy, arrogant mistakes.
True.
In 1989, there was no internet. You couldn't just Google an MIT alumni database. He likely didn't expect a global network of researchers to eventually audit his entire life.
What?
Furthermore, there is the Duxler discrepancy.
Oh, man, the Duxler thing.
When Lazar was pressed on national television to name a single professor he studied under at Caltech, he named a man named William Duxler.
And they found Duxler.
They did. Investigators tracked down Dr. William Duxler. He was a real person and a real professor. But institutional records prove Duxler taught exclusively at Pierce Junior College in Los Angeles, an institution which Lazar had previously attended.
Wow.
Duxler never taught a single day at Caltech. Lazar clearly panicked, pulled a name from his actual junior college past, and applied it to his fabricated Caltech history.
Ouch. That is incredibly damning. But the academic void isn't his only baggage. He has a criminal record, which gives detractors a permanent weapon to attack his character and motivations.
Correct. In 1990, just a year after going public with his UFO claims, Lazar was convicted on a felony pandering charge related to his involvement in setting up computer systems for a local Nevada bordello.
Right.
Then, years later in 2006, he faced another conviction related to violating federal laws regarding the interstate sale of restricted chemicals through his scientific supply company, United Nuclear.
So the skeptics look at this and say, he's a criminal, he's a liar, of course you made up the aliens. But what about the science itself? Do actual nuclear physicists look at his element 115 theory and see a misunderstood visionary?
By and large, no. They see fundamental structural errors in his understanding of particle physics. Prominent nuclear physicists, including the late Stanton Friedman, investigated Lazar extensively.
And Friedman was a major UFO guy.
He was crucial here because he was a serious UFO researcher. He broke the Roswell story. and certainly not a defender of government secrecy. But Friedman argued that Lazar's technical explanations were impossible.
What specifically?
For instance, Friedman pointed out that the probability cross-sections for bombarding a superheavy element with protons to create a stable antimatter reaction just don't work mathematically. Friedman concluded these are elemental mistakes an actual MIT graduate simply would not make.
And on top of all of that, 35 years have passed. We are in 2026. And there's still zero publicly available physical evidence. No former Hollies from S4 have ever come forward to say, I was on the engineering team with Loeb. No leaked document has ever explicitly named Project Galileo, which is what he said the reverse engineering program was called. And no one has ever produced a single gram of stable element 115.
This combination of negative evidence brings us to what counterintelligence analysts would call Framework A, the hoax model.
Okay, let's define Framework A.
This perspective views Bob Lazar not as a heroic whistleblower, but as a highly intelligent, technically literate, but fundamentally dishonest technician who was experiencing severe financial and legal strain in 1989.
He was facing bankruptcy, right?
Facing impending bankruptcy and a pandering investigation. So he constructed an elaborate, high-profile public diversion. He manufactured a hoax so grand and wrapped himself so tightly in the UFO mythos that it made him virtually untouchable.
Because if they arrest her?
It ensures that any subsequent legal action against him would look to the public like a government cover-up to silence him.
Wow. Okay, so Framework A paints him as an opportunistic genius who spun a web of lies to save his own skin. And honestly, looking at the missing college records and the junior college professor slip-up, you might be ready to write him off entirely right now.
You ready to close the book?
But you can't, because just as you try to dismiss Bob Lazar, you trip over the physical paper trail. We have to introduce the stubborn, incredibly frustrating pieces of verifiable evidence that the government couldn't quite erase.
This is where the story ceases to be a simple debunking and becomes a true historical paradox. Because for every point Framework A makes, there is a physical artifact that Framework A cannot easily explain away.
Let's start with the Los Alamos cover-up.
Right after Lazar goes on television in 1989, government officials at Los Alamos National Laboratory go on the record. They issue statements to journalists saying, "We have absolutely no record of a Robert Lazar ever working at this facility. He is completely unknown to us."
They tried to erase him from the institution entirely.
But George Knapp, the investigative journalist who originally broke the story on KLAS TV, didn't accept that official denial. Knapp dug deep into the local community and actually found a physical, internal 1982 Los Alamos National Laboratory telephone directory.
Yes.
And right there, printed in the directory among the physicists and engineers, is Robert Lazar. Next to his name is the specific notation K/M, which stood for Kirk Meyer, an outside scientific subcontractor that staffed the lab.
So the government blatantly lied. They said he was never there, and Knapp held up a phone book proving he walked their halls. That immediately changes the dynamic of the entire debate.
It does.
If the government is willing to systematically lie about a phone book entry to discredit him, what else are they wiping from the archives? Are they wiping MIT? Are they wiping Caltech?
What's fascinating here is how this plays into the narrative of institutional sanitization. If a deep state security apparatus wants to completely discredit a rogue whistleblower, the easiest method is to erase their academic and professional records, making them look like a delusional civilian.
But wiping a life is hard.
Very hard. Sometimes they miss things in the analog world, like the biometric scanner.
Oh, this is one of the most compelling details of the entire saga. Back in 1989, Lazar described the security protocols at S4. He said to get into the really sensitive engineering areas, you didn't punch a code into a keypad and you didn't use a fingerprint scanner.
He described an exotic, futuristic device.
He said you placed your hand on a plate with tiny pins and a bright light shone down, measuring the physical bone structure, the specific geometry and length of the bones in your hand to grant access.
And in 1989, everyone laughed. Critics said he watched too much science fiction. Hand geometry scanners weren't a thing the public knew about.
But decades later, through declassified Department of Energy security documents, it was proven that a device called the Identimet 2000 existed.
It was manufactured by a company called Stellar Systems. It was a hand geometry recognition matrix that utilized pins and light diodes to measure finger lengths and web thickness.
It perfectly, exactly matched Lazar's technical description.
And the documents proved it was actively deployed at highly classified Department of Energy and nuclear facilities during that exact time period in the late 1980s.
How does a fraud guess that? How does a civilian who makes up alien spaceships perfectly describe a classified biometric scanner years before the general public or the tech press knows it exists?
It's a massive point in his column.
And then there's the infamous W-2 form.
The W-2 wage statement is perhaps the most heavily analyzed document in ufology. Lazar possesses a physical 1989 W-2 listing his employer as the United States Department of Naval Intelligence with a specific combat code of E2.
Now, skeptics love to tear this document apart because forensic auditing shows deep formatting anomalies.
Yeah, they point out that it's his department instead of the official legally correct title, which is the Office of Naval Intelligence.
And the OMB, that's the Office of Management and Budget, and EIN numbers printed on the slip, do not match the standard federal payroll formats for that tax year. Skeptics look at that and say, look, he forged it on a typewriter and he didn't even get the name of the agency right. Case closed.
But wait, back up and look at how black budgets actually function. Counterintelligence analysts view those very anomalies completely differently. Intentionally flawed or anomalous payroll wrappers are a known, documented administrative tactic for highly compartmented special access programs.
Wait, they make mistakes on purpose. Why?
To protect the funding, they use these anomalous forms to hide deep black funding lines from standard IRS routing algorithms.
Oh, that is sneaky.
If the EIN matched a known defense budget, an aggressive auditor could trace the money back to unacknowledged projects. By creating a flawed payroll wrapper, the money drops off the standard grid. So the typos and flaws in the document might not be proof of forgery. They might actually be proof of its authenticity, the shadowy world of black budget finance.
That is wild. It's an administrative hall of mirrors. And we can't forget the Tikaboo Valley flights. Lazar didn't just tell people about the craft, he tried to physically show them.
In March and April of 1989,
Yeah, having figured out the flight testing schedule for the sport model, he took his girlfriend, a friend named Jean Huff, and UFO researcher John Lear out to the remote Tikaboo Valley on consecutive Wednesday nights.
they drove out into the pitch-black desert, set up a high-powered telescope, and oriented it toward the Groom Lake mountain ranges.
And on film, they observed and captured an intensely glowing elliptical craft performing radical, staggered maneuvers like starping on a dime, darting in impossible angles, stuff that completely defied known aviation capabilities.
But they pushed their luck too far. On April 5, 1989, on their third trip out to the desert, they were caught.
They were intercepted on public land by a coalition of Lincoln County sheriff's deputies and Groom Lake-based security personnel. And here's the kicker. Lazar's name was already on the list. They knew exactly who he was.
And the very next day, he is summoned to Indian Springs Airfield. His security clearance is immediately revoked, and he's threatened with espionage charges.
That specific interception is what triggered him to go on TV as Dennis a month later. He felt his life was in danger. He wanted to be public so the government couldn't just make him disappear without questions being asked.
And the government's highly aggressive response to his public disclosure adds another significant layer of credibility to Framework B. Multiple independent witnesses have corroborated a massive multi-agency intimidation and surveillance campaign against Lazar following his 1989 broadcasts.
We're talking unmarked cars parked outside his house for weeks. Strange break-ins where nothing of monetary value was taken.
Even the investigative journalist George Knapp reported being followed and having his phone tapped. And this pressure campaign didn't just stop in the 90s.
No, it kept going.
In 2017, decades later, there was a massive, highly coordinated FBI raid on Lazar's scientific supply company in Michigan. Dozens of agents in tactical gear. Now, federal officials claimed it was part of a routine inquiry into the interstate shipping of restricted chemicals.
But the timing is beyond suspicious. The raid coincided exactly with the production and filming of Jeremy Corbell's documentary about Lazar.
Right.
A lot of intelligence watchers suspect the chemical inquiry was merely a pretextual warrant. The real goal of the raid was to search for residual technical artifacts or classified materials Lazar might have smuggled out of S4.
Specifically, they were looking for a sample of element 115 he reportedly hid.
The irony embedded in that raid is profound. Lazar was effectively banned from government scientific work in 1989, so he started a private supply company. And over the years, two of his biggest clients became Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories.
The very institutions associated with America's most secret nuclear research are actively buying radiation detectors and technical equipment from the man who claims he reverse-engineered a flying saucer.
It's unbelievable. You couldn't write a script like this. Okay, so we have this stalemate. The skeptics have the missing MIT degrees, the junior college professor, and the physics violations. The supporters have the biometric hand scanner, the LANL phone book, the W-2, and the intimidation campaign.
For 30 years, this debate just goes round and round in agonizing circles.
But then we hit the paradigm shift. The year is 2026, and we get telemetric vindication.
To truly understand the magnitude of the 2026 shift, we have to trace the recent road to disclosure. For 70 years, the government's official public stance was that UAPs did not exist, and there was no coordinated effort to study them.
But that dam finally broke in December 2017.
When the New York Times revealed the existence of ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, the Pentagon released 3 Navy videos showing craft behaving in ways that defied classical physics.
And then it escalated dramatically. In 2023, David Grush, a highly decorated former Air Force intelligence officer who worked on the UAP task force, testified under oath before Congress.
He blew the whistle, alleging that the U.S. government operates a secret, multi-decade program to recover and reverse engineer non-human craft.
He said they hide the funding inside private defense contractors, using IARD's independent research and development funds, completely bypassing congressional oversight.
Now, it's vital to note that Grush did not specifically mention Bob Lazar. He didn't mention the S-4 facility at Papoose Lake. But the structural administrative reality Grush testified to, deep black reverse engineering of non-human technology, compartmentalized beyond normal clearances, hidden via aerospace contractors like EG&G, is identical to the structural reality Lazar mapped out in 1989.
It's the exact same blueprint. He described the machinery of the cover-up 30 years before a decorated intelligence officer confirmed it under oath. And that brings us to the main event, May 2026, the Pure Sewick files.
The Department of War, forced by congressional mandates for maximum transparency, releases over 390 declassified UAP files, videos, and multi-sensor logs to the public.
Okay.
And what is inside these files is absolutely staggering. Let's talk about the Lakatsky dossier.
Yes, Dr. James Lakatsky.
He's a former Defense Intelligence Agency scientist and a key figure in ATIP. His declassified report is perhaps one of the most stunning documents in the entire Pure Sue release. He explicitly confirms in written documentation that the United States is in possession of a craft of unknown origin and had successfully gained physical access to its interior.
And read the physical description of the craft from the dossier.
Lakatsky's technical profile states the craft had a streamlined configuration suitable for aerodynamic flight, but no intakes, exhaust, wings, or control surfaces. In fact, it appeared not to have an engine, fuel tanks, or fuel.
Here's where it gets really interesting. No exhaust, no wings, no engine. A seamless, streamlined configuration. That is a 100% perfect point-for-point match with Bob Lazar's 1989 description of the sport model.
How is that possible unless he actually saw one? The physical description is incredibly compelling, but the kinematic modeling, the hard physics data derived from these new files, is even more profound. Let's look at the zero inertial signature. In 2023, a highly technical, peer-reviewed paper in the journal Drones analyzed the multi-sensor data from the famous 2004 Nimitz Tic Tac encounter.
Right. This is the encounter where Commander David Fravor chased a 40-foot white oblong object that had no wings and no exhaust over the Pacific Ocean.
The Drones paper analyzed the radar telemetry data. It showed the craft accelerating from 28,000 feet down to sea level in 0.7 seconds. The math on that maneuver is staggering.
What's the G-force on that?
It equals an acceleration of up to 46,500 Gs. In classical physics, moving a mass that size through Earth's atmosphere at that speed requires approximately 13,000 gigawatts of energy.
Which, if you know anything about physics, should trigger a massive catastrophic explosion.
It should vaporize the craft.
Pushing through the air that fast should create a sonic boom that shatters glass for miles, and the friction should cause extreme thermal ionization. It should create a plasma sheath that lights up the sky like a second sun.
Yet the military radar, the FLIR forward-looking infrared sensors, and the visual witnesses confirmed a total absence of heat signatures. No thermal plume, no sonic booms, and no aerodynamic drag. Why? How does the FLIR show a cold object moving at hypersonic speeds?
It perfectly validates Lazar's theory from 1989.
Because, just like he said, it's not pushing through the air.
Exactly.
Lazar said the craft utilizes a localized space-time warp. It falls through distorted space, Because the local coordinate space moves with the vehicle, the air molecules simply slide around the warped boundary metric without ever touching the hull.
The craft's physical structure and anything inside it experiences zero net inertial force. The thermal energy isn't generated because there is no friction.
It completely insulates itself from the universe around it. It's in its own bubble. That is why Commander Fravor, after seeing the Tic Tac, actually spoke with Bob Lazar and publicly stated that the total lack of a propulsion signature he witnessed was entirely consistent with Lazar's gravity wave description.
But wait, there is another video correlation from the Pier RSU files, the belly first rotation.
Yes, the declassified 2015 gimbal video captured off the East Coast. The multi-sensor tracking data in that video shows an anomalous craft traveling horizontally. Then, as the fighter jets track it, it executes a smooth, highly mechanical tilt to rotate 90 degrees against the wind, orienting its belly forward without losing any velocity or altitude.
And Lazar predicted this specific aerodynamic anomaly too. In 1989, he explicitly stated that to enter delta mode, the high-velocity travel mode, the sport model couldn't just fly forward like an airplane. It had to physically tilt its base, aiming its belly directly toward its destination to align the 3 gravity emitters.
The gimbal video captures a craft doing exactly what Lazar said a gravity-propelled ship has to do to accelerate.
It is a striking, deeply specific mechanical correlation. Which brings us back to the ultimate puzzle piece, the fuel source, element 115. Critics have long argued that predicting an element at atomic number 115 was easy. It was just the next blank spot on the periodic table, theoretically predicted by a concept known as the island of stability.
Right.
What exactly is the island of stability?
In nuclear physics, as elements get heavier, they become incredibly unstable and decay rapidly. But the nuclear shell model suggests that at certain magic numbers of protons and neutrons, super heavy elements might form stable, long-lasting isotopes.
Like finding a sweet spot.
It's like building a precarious tower of blocks that suddenly becomes structurally sound if you arrange the top layer in a perfect geometric pattern. In 2003, a joint team of Russian and American scientists successfully synthesized element 115, which was later officially named Moscovium.
But the Moscovium they made in the lab is highly unstable, right? It decays in milliseconds.
Correct. The isotopes created in the particle accelerator so far are highly radioactive and exist only for fractions of a second. They look nothing like the stable, physical, orange metallic disks Lazar described holding in his hand. But this raises an important question.
If Lazar is a complete fraud, how did he know to assign gravitational wave properties and antimatter generation to a super heavy element decades before we could even synthesize it to test it?
Exactly. It's one thing to look at a chart and say element 115 will exist eventually. It's an entirely different level to say element 115 will be the exact catalyst for an antimatter reaction that produces a gravitational field we can amplify.
He wasn't just predicting the existence of the element, he was predicting its behavioral physics in an application we still don't fully understand.
This creates the element 115 paradox. Is it a remarkable coincidence, an incredibly lucky, hyperspecific, educated guess by a sci-fi fan, or is that evidence of actual technical knowledge derived from a classified program?
Which forces us to look at the big picture and confront the ultimate paradox of Bob Lazar. We're bringing all of this evidence together, the physics, the lies, the telemetry, and you, the listener, have to choose which reality is harder to believe. Let's compare the two frameworks clearly.
In Framework A, the hoax model, Bob Lazar is history's most disciplined, strategically unrewarded fabricator. He invented a story in 1989 to get out of financial and legal trouble. He maintained that exact, highly technical story without variation for 37 years.
And somehow, this guy from the bottom third of his high school class got incredibly, impossibly lucky.
Very lucky.
He accurately predicted the deployment of biometric hand geometry scanners. He predicted the synthesis of super heavy elements. He predicted the specific aerodynamic anomalies like zero thermal signatures and belly first rotation that multi-million-dollar Navy sensor networks would record decades later.
He guessed all of that, and he managed to convince counterintelligence agents that his fake W-2 was real enough to warrant stalking and raiding him for years.
It requires you to believe he is essentially a psychic grifter. To believe he is a fraud, you almost have to believe in magic. But then, look at Framework B, the compartmented whistleblower model.
In this reality, Lazar is telling the truth. He's a genuine whistleblower with incredible practical engineering skills. He was recruited into an ultra-black program, and when he went rogue to save his own life, a shadow security apparatus operating completely outside of democratic oversight systematically erased his background.
They deleted his college records, they denied his employment, and they ran an aggressive psychological operation to make him look crazy to the public.
And when assessing these frameworks, you have to look at his behavior over the last 35 years. If this was a con, it was a terrible one financially. Unlike almost everyone else in the UFO sphere, Lazar did not aggressively monetize his story.
No, he didn't go on the convention circuit charging for autographs. He didn't write a book for almost 30 years. He just quietly retreated to run his scientific supply business. That is not the standard psychological profile of a hoaxer seeking fame or fortune.
He just wanted to be left alone.
But the world wouldn't let him. And now, the 2026 PURC filers have completely changed the math on his legacy.
They absolutely have. The implications here are monumental. The 2026 PRC feelers do not prove Bob Lazar's personal timeline. They don't prove he went to MIT, and they don't erase his criminal record. But they absolutely, unequivocally validate the technological context of his claims.
The core of the technology.
The structural core of what he said in 1989, that the government retrieves seamless craft lacking conventional controls, hides them in buried engineering initiatives, and that these craft manipulate the space-time metric, has transitioned from speculative fiction into the official data-backed records of modern military intelligence.
The conversation isn't, is this possible anymore? The Navy and the Department of War just showed us the radar telemetry proving it is possible, and it's happening in our skies. The conversation has shifted to how long can the full architecture of this reality remain hidden from the public?
If Lazar is telling the truth, even partially, it means humanity has been sitting in the dark while a breakaway segment of the security state studies technologies that could revolutionize our entire understanding of physics, energy production, and our place in the universe. We are burning fossil fuels while the answer to clean, infinite energy is locked in a mountain in Nevada.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive. As you process all of this, the gravity waves, the tic-tacs dropping 28,000 feet, the missing MIT degrees, the hand scanners, I want to leave you with one final, incredibly provocative thought, something we briefly mentioned but really need to let sink in.
Yes, the briefing documents at S4.
While Lazar was at S4, surrounded by this mind-bending alien hardware, he said the hardware wasn't the thing that disturbed him the most. Before he was allowed to touch the sport model, he was given classified briefing documents to read to catch him up on the history of the program.
And in those documents, he read that the beings who built these craft originated from the Zeta Reticuli binary star system.
And the documents outlined a history of contact with Earth going back approximately 10,000 years. An ongoing, active relationship between this non-human intelligence and humanity.
But it was the specific language used in those documents that haunted Lazar. It's the detail that he says still disturbs him profoundly to this day.
According to Lazar, the briefing documents did not refer to human beings as citizens or an evolving species or even scientific subjects. The documents allegedly referred to human beings simply as containers.
Containers, it implies a vessel. Something biological meant to hold something else. And Lazar has consistently maintained that he has no idea what that actually means. He just knows that he read it. And it was presented to him by the intelligence apparatus as cold, hard fact.
Containers for what? Souls. Genetic material, data for an intergalactic simulation. I want you to mull over that chilling, unexplained detail as you go about your day. When we started, we talked about how comforting it is when a historical diagnosis is binary, employed or not employed, truth or lie. But the waters of the Bob Lazar story are as murky as they come.
Yet, deep down in that mud, buried under decades of intimidation and missing files, there are artifacts shining with a terrifying kind of truth.
The truth is rarely binary in this space. It demands open-minded skepticism. It requires us to hold the paradox, demanding hard evidence while remaining willing to follow that evidence into entirely new paradigms of reality, even when it challenges our most fundamental beliefs about the universe.
Thank you for taking this deep dive into the source material with us.
Stay curious, keep looking at the sky, and keep questioning the limits of our reality.